English translation 345th contact. Monday, 21st of July 2003, 15:11 hours.
Man, friend Ptah, this is really a surprise. Be warmly welcomed and greeted, you universe explorer. Tell me, since when are you back here? Florina only told me today at noon that today someone will still drop by, but she said nothing about the fact that this would be you. Clearly it goes well with you, and you also appear to be contented. Therefore, I assume your expedition must have culminated successfully.
You are very pleased to see me, my friend. This applies, however, also on my part, and it particularly pleases me to see you well and in good health. You be greeted as well. Yes, your assumption is correct because my expedition was successful. This at least for the first venture, about which you certainly want to hear, I assume, yes? To say is this, that suddenly everything very quickly has come to an end because on the 30th of June, when we have unexpectedly found a humanity to which a probe in space brought us when we searched for its origin. Unfortunately, I do not have enough time today to explain everything in detail, so I will do so at a later point in time.
Of course. I know, because Quetzal reported to me regarding this probe. However, he was of the opinion that your expedition was to last still a longer time. Now, however, start shooting, briefly and succinctly. What arises from the foreign universe? You must not be detailed, but just briefly and succinctly describe the most important events. We can talk about it at a later time in detail, as you say.
So then listen, actually it appeared that we must extend our expedition still several months, but then success arrived unexpectedly. First, after several months of searching, we found a planet on which rather still wild humans lived, who were only equipped with stone axes, stone spears, and stone knives.
Thus cavemen, respectively Stone Age humans or similar, correct?
Yes. They lived partly in caves, but also partly in primitive huts, which they made out of branches, leaves, and moss. Across the planet, we were able to identify 46 different groupings. The planet itself had large primeval forests as well as fertile land, on which many and diverse animals roamed and fed themselves on all kinds of things. You can yourself imagine approximately the same appearance that Earth presented around 6 million years ago. Weeks later, after which we further penetrated into the foreign universe, we came upon a small artificial object which was drifting through free space. When we got hold of it, we established that it was a probe created by intelligent life forms, which certainly had served for the exploration of a planet, but however apparently was driven from its course and was thrown out into free space. So we calculated the flight path of the probe and followed it for several months, after which we then actually reached a solar system, in which about a dozen planets moved around a central star, although certainly only 2 of the planets were developed in such a wise that they were able to carry higher life, as we soon discovered. On one of the planets, the third, which was somewhat smaller than Earth, and which was about 1.51 astronomical units distant from the Sun, and which traveled on its 677-day-long orbit about the central star and had a self-rotation of 21 hours and 37 minutes. There existed no human but only higher animal life forms of primeval form, as well as also this primeval condition applied to the vegetation. The second planet, somewhat greater than the Earth, had 3 large island continents, which existed in a large saltwater ocean and were surrounded by a large number of smaller islands. Their entire mass was around 1/3 greater than the continental masses and islands of Earth together. This planet was at a distance from the Sun of 1.48 astronomical units and had a self-rotation of 22 hours and 52 minutes. the planet carried human civilizations. In fact, there were 3 different races, which consisted of diverse peoples, who were of white, green, and blue color, adding to a total number of around 498 million human beings. Our clarifications, which we carried out unobserved and without direct contact undertakings with the occupants, resulted in astonishing things, as I want to explain as follows. The populations of the 3 continents speak only 3 different languages, each with a uniform dialect, which we have not found anywhere else. And although the 3 races work together in every respect, such as medically, scientifically, and technologically, etc., they do not mix with one another in the wise that there would exist marriage alliances between members of different races. All 3 races had the same culture, the same state of knowledge in all things, and a medical science, which, highly developed, registered only just minor sicknesses, so in this respect, they are far ahead of terrestrial medical and surgical science. There was nothing defined regarding religions and cults of any kind, because all 3 races do not recognize belief in any wise, but only a kind of universal philosophy, which is based on the fact that all life and existence arises from a higher power, which is simply called the might by them. This is quite reverently observed, respected, and honored, however, it is not worshipped and not venerated. The might constitutes for them all origin of life and all existence, which both comes to be, and again passes away and again comes to be. And a unity in a duality is taught. So the material and the might, which lives in the material, passes away and again comes to be, while the material dissolves and changes into other material forms.
This is practically the reincarnation of the spirit form. The might would be then simply creation and at the same time the spirit form.
It is so, just only with other terms, as well as also everything interpreted and understood by the occupants of the planet. Regarding these 3 races still is to say that they are absolutely peaceful, in fact, both from human to human, as well as however also among the races and their peoples themselves. Wars are foreign to them just as well as hate and criminality, and purely technologically viewed, they are at the position which prevailed with Earth humans in the year 1968.
Astonishing. Then, these human beings are far ahead of Earthlings. However, how is it then with the form of government?
Each people decides totally on all interests. Although a total representation of all 3 races exists, which is built in the form of an assembly of men and women, which as highest authority is to gain the required recognition of the will of the people.
A little complicatedly expressed, my friend. If I correctly understand your words, then with these 3 races and their peoples, so to say, there exists a combined leadership, which consists of persons, respectively representatives, of all 3 races. This leadership personnel exists in the service of the people, respectively of all peoples, and executes their decision. Respectively, they are responsible for the fact that the will of the people, respectively, peoples is carried out. Then it is, so to say, a proper democracy. And how is it with these leadership personnel? Do they have then also their own power of decision?
Your interpretation corresponds to the sense of my words. The leadership personnel, which consists of 3 persons from all peoples, have only executing and advisory powers of the respective peoples, and they do not have their own possibility for decision. All leadership personnel are elevated to the standing of wise persons, whose duty it also is to work out all required necessities and present them to the people, who then decide about them. Incidentally, the 3 races and all their peoples do not know any party system, as is the case with the Earth humans. On the other hand, they have the manner of voting in the wise, as was the case since ancient times in Switzerland, in the manner of rural communities, in which the majority decision applied. The interests on which must be voted are announced first by the leadership personnel on the day of the vote, when the people assemble and have to deliver a for or against vote. So therefore no previous consultations are able to be made. Consequently, each citizen of each people, according to his or her own discretion and in accordance with his or her decision, has to make their own choice.
Interesting. How is it then with the military, respectively the armed forces?
Here, pure harmony and peace exists among all three races and all of their peoples for a little more than 208 planetary years, and no armed forces and no weapons industries for military purposes exist.
And so what about the police?
There is no such organization in the wise like on the earth. There are powers for order, but these form a law and order protection and security protection, which provides for the order and security of the population in relation to natural events, by which I mean natural events. The races and their peoples themselves live in an orderly manner, which has no one who has gotten very badly out of control of the good human nature, like this is the case with the peoples of the earth.
So to speak, an ideal state?
In certain respects, one can indeed speak of an ideal.
What to me is still of interest, dear friend, is their technology of locomotion. Do they have also still such primitive airplanes and automobiles, etc., like we on Earth? This is certainly to be assumed, if they have the technological position, which we possessed in 1968, am I correct?
Your assumption is not entirely correct, because certainly they have a similar technology of locomotion, but the drives are not sustained by explosion motors using benzene and diesel oil, but they are driven with synthetic substances. All three races and all of their peoples do not exploit the petroleum of the world. All necessary substances for all things are from plants of many kinds as well as produced synthetically.
And the food?
There exist large community gardens as well as joint farming holdings, like gardens and small farms, which however are also run by individual persons or small groups. And before you ask, there are economically useful animals kept and bred for work and for food purposes, though however any form of cruelty to animals is taboo. Flesh for food of humans is solely produced through breeding and slaughtering of certain animals. Fruits, vegetables, and flesh of many and diverse forms, as well as all other necessary food items and required products of other kinds are in abundance and plentiful. And from this follows that nowhere does famine exist. All bodies of waters and forests, meadows, fields, and marsh areas are healthy and completely intact. Chemical products are not laid down for the purposes of protection or growth of plants, but only substances, which in turn consist of natural products. Hunting for any wild game is taboo because game meat is likewise only produced through breeding. Like this also is the case with the flesh of fish, etc.
Have you also established how old the humans get to be?
Naturally, the average age of the humans of all three races is a uniform 128 years, and death as a rule is due to old age.
So they are also much ahead of the Earthlings in this respect. But what happens to the deceased human beings? I mean, how are they laid to rest? Cremated or buried, etc.?
The deceased are laid out upon a stone bed far away from residential areas in especially created for them. Individual, small, yet very stable stone houses, after which the entrance is closed with rocks and boulders. After that, the deceased are left to decompose.
Do you mean by this something like a vault? Is it with the bereaved then also, as is usual on Earth, that they visit these tombs?
No, this does not likewise belong to tradition, as well as also not the decoration of tombs with flowers, etc. Also, no inscriptions are displayed, and no ritual at all is indulged in at the burial. Among all races exists also no fear of dying and death. The whole thing is considered and honored as a natural and inevitable event.
So should it also be with us. Yet tell me now, you are only really able to reach this foreign universe, because in your ancient data you had the recordings of Hanok at your disposal. Was Hanok perhaps already over there? And do you go back again soon?
The recordings in accordance with certain things indicated that Hanok was actually in this foreign universe. However, we first must exactly still discover this, which a travel back in time back will certainly be required precisely into the time when Hanok worked. On my part, for the time being, I will not be returning back there. But a large part of our expedition remains over there. Consequently, it will further explore the three human races and everything around them, as well as a large part of the universe.
Good. Then I do not want to ask you further about these things. Indeed, you said that you wanted to tell me more later.
I will do this little by little when we talk in a private way.
Very well. But now that you are here, I have a question. Look here. This little article with the picture was sent to me. Unfortunately, the information was missing from which magazine the article came from. Anyway, I was asked if I knew what origin the bronze disk with the cosmic representation or the Pleiades was from. Do you know anything about it?
We have two similar sky disks in our possession. One comes from ancient Greece and the other from the Sumerians. The object pictured here is probably from ancient Greece. I myself am unfamiliar with the object, but it is identical in appearance to our specimen from ancient Greece.
Then this is probably not a Celtic product, but an ancient Greek one.
This will certainly be the case, because the Nordic races of former times had a considerable trade with the southern countries, so also with ancient Greece, but also with the Sumerians and Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Medes, and Iranians, etc. But even before that, the Northerners were already trading with the Southerners, and trade was even going on as far as the Far East.
But we do not know much about that, or nothing about it. But regarding the Medes and Iranians, those were areas in the Near East, no? And to my knowledge, Iran means land of the Aryans, or am I wrong?
What you say is true.
Then it is also true that Iran was known very early in the north, although first records of Iran do not exist until about 243 BC. The Medes lived in antiquity in Median, in a mountainous highland in the northwest of today's Persia and Iran. The capitals at that time were called Ecbatana and Ragai. The Medes migrated in the 9th century BC and formed a large state, which then expanded and was seized by Cyrus II in 550 BC. In the Achaemenid Empire, the Medes became the second nation after the Persians. But there was also the Great Media in the southern part of the country, which was founded after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, which fell to the Parthian Empire, into which the northern part was also incorporated in the first year AD.
Your knowledge is admirable.
Thank you for the fruit. But the whole thing is really half as bad, because when I was in Persia and Iran for a long time, I was naturally interested in everything and anything that had to do with the country. I did the same in all the other 42 countries I visited and worked in all kinds of fields. I always felt the need to be a local rather than a tourist, so I always tried to respect the customs, mentality, and culture of the peoples in all the countries I visited. I always behaved like one of them, and therefore never had any difficulties, and was considered by the humans in all the countries I visited as one of them. In contrast to me, I experienced that European, American and Canadian people, as well as people from other countries, very often had difficulties as travelers and tourists, that they were robbed and stones were thrown at them, or were even killed, etc.
For certain necessities, you always dressed like the locals, cultivated their religion with them, and followed all their rules, as I know.
Yes, I did, and not only because it was a necessity to be accepted, but primarily because I respected the humans, their customs, their religion and culture, and consequently identified with them. Therefore, I was also recognized as their equal, honored reverently, and treated accordingly. And therefore, it was also possible for me to get into areas and into houses, as well as into holy temples and mosques, as well as into family circles and groups of all kinds and places. As travelers, tourists, and journalists, etc., never could and probably never will be.
I am well aware of this, also that you led a very adventurous life, which I could envy you for, my friend.
You, of all people, must envy me, because when I think about the fact that you and Quetzal borrowed my .45 Magnum revolver umpteen years ago to shoot around in a primeval world and scare cute giant dinosaurs, I could probably go green with envy myself. Really, I wish I could have been there. What is that?
They are calling me. Unfortunately, I have to go now, and urgently. Then goodbye, my friend.
Then take care, my son. Farewell, and let me hear from you again soon.